This is actually part of the cemetery master plan. I think it's got a longer official name, but it is one of the plans that falls under the comprehensive plan, kind of like the Muni Land Plan does. We have a Parks and Rec master plan. Anyway, I can't remember some of the other plans, but we do have multiple plans. And so our cemetery master plan has not been updated since 1996, which is pretty unfortunate. So this is kind of an introduction to you guys tonight, and Celine has done some great work, which she's going to show you on kind of some important pieces in regards to GIS and research and creating tools for archiving and public input. So she's going to cover that. We're going to talk to you guys just about the general process of I guess, a burial when someone passes and they want to get a permit and do all that kind of stuff. We're talking about that. We're going to talk to you guys a little bit about current code, and then we haven't closed obviously the 1996 or 1997 cemetery master plan, and just we just want you guys to become familiar with this. And then at the end, if you guys, we have also gotten some great citizen comments, but yeah, just want to get some direction and input on what you guys would like to see, or what you guys need from us, how we can continue to revise and start to update this kind of an important plan for our community. So, yeah.
Okay, this one's going to be kind of more like a lax presentation than I gave to council. So if you guys have questions in between, feel free to ask them.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Because I was doing that one real quick because I had a lot to say, but now I don't have a time limit. So the city cemetery, the story behind the maps. I started this project in April of 2022, and I had come across it when I was working with our past GIS contractor, Gary Greenberg. He was showing me how to do ArcGIS Online, like our online portal where we put our other maps, and I had saw that there was a cemetery map, and we had been getting requests for burials to be in the cemetery, and we were kind of running around like, I don't know if you can bury them here, I don't know. So when I saw this on the ArcGIS Online, I was like, hey, what is that? And he had mentioned that a couple years ago, a volunteer had started working on a grid to start placing people and having actual rows and just ID numbers to easily find people. So Gary also had mentioned that there was a book called Kenai Totem Tracers. I don't know if you guys have heard of that group. Mm-hmm. It's a genealogical society, mm-hmm. I believe. They took the time in 1983 and then sometime in the 2000s to create 2 books for all the cemeteries on the Kenai Peninsula, and they recorded all the individuals and they put that in that book. And our past community development director, Kerry Martin, from 1996 to early 2000s, he had taken a lot of time to go through our city cemetery and the American Legion and just different ones, and he went through and tried to figure out as many people as he could identify and then put them, or gave it to Kenai Totem Tracers to put in their book. So I used that book because we had a copy of it, and I finished the grid. So this is what the grid looked like at the end. So the volunteer Marcia Vincent had started in this little corner, and then she didn't, I don't know what happened, but she wasn't able to finish it, and then I just kind of went with it. It is a little wonky in some areas, and then there's some areas where I can't tell where it goes, like this section right here might be an earlier section of the cemetery, and we just can't find it with the totem tracers. Kerry Martin couldn't find it back then, so I don't have as much information on that part. And then the white or light blue colored right here this is the Oddfellows section, and then this is that new part that we are placing people in currently. There was a survey done in 2020 or 2021 with past community development director Jackie Wild. They had gotten surveyed, and so we've been using those plots to place people in because we're more comfortable placing them there than in other sections of the cemetery. And then this was the past GIS data. So I did have stuff to work from. I'm not sure when they took these points though. So that was I didn't know any of the background with this information. I believe it could have been from the 2000s when Kerry Martin did his surveys, because he had a hand-drawn map and then maybe someone had put it in eventually. And so the different colors indicate their different markers. So I think blue was temporary markers. So that was the data that I worked with previously. And then to make sure that this data was still accurate and to add any other recent burials, because I'm not sure if we kept a good track, sadly, from before when we got in. So for a couple years, I'm not sure how many people were buried. So we did order a subfoot GPS or a GNSS receiver to go out and try to mark as many as we could, and just to see if they were accurate with the past GIS data. But we ordered it in like May of last year, and then it took like it took 6+ months. And so I was panicking because I was like, summer's almost done. And so we rented the equipment from Anchorage, and then me and Courtney went out for a week, and we tried to hustle our way through and get as many as we could in a week done. So the red is the points that we took, and when we first did this, we were having the GPR people come out after us, so we thought that it would be more accurate with the GPR results, so we didn't go to every depression or every mound. We just went to the ones that had actual headstones in hopes that the GPR would catch those later. And then we had to wait for the GPR results that were being processed. And so during that time, I tried to go back out just to make sure that my GIS data and the plots that I had started put in, because I was like, okay, I'll just start working on the grid and putting people in, putting all their information. And I went to go try to like reconfirm all their placements, but it started snowing. So I kind of ran out of time. But when we did get the GPR results in late October of 2022, we got it from the company Logic Geophysics and Analytics. We did see that the analyst had found a lot of major disturbances. So where's it go? So this is, I should show you. I'll show you in the maps too as well, on the online maps. But in the areas where I thought tons of people would be, it could be just because they were too old of burials. So like in the southwest section, I guess I was thinking there'd be more here, because when you walk out there, you can feel the depressions on the ground. But maybe because they were just decomposed faster, or how they were, if they weren't embalmed versus they were embalmed and caskets or not. But then there's some areas where she was like, it was such a large disturbance she couldn't find like specific points. So she had just like giant squares. One of the sections, which isn't pictured here, is in the Oddfellows new part where we did half of that, and they had found a lot of disturbances. So I'm not sure. We've tried to clarify with like Sue and Lee again, like, has anyone been buried here? And they're like, no, they don't believe there is. So I'm not sure if these disturbances are just like roots or just from like a prior road, or just, I don't know, anything in our soil. So they're not as accurate as we wanted them to be. But they're still like I found a couple people with them, so it was good that we did this. And then once I had gotten all the data, all the plots put in, I created the 2 mapping applications this winter. One is like a master map where you can search for your loved ones, and then one's an editable map, because I know people have information for where people could be buried, so they can contribute to the map, and then we can add it to the master map. So I'll show you now what our new website is. So because I did all of this research, I was like, we should have a web page for all this information. So I created one. If you went under community, and then it's going to be under residents, we have the cemetery and then all the different subsections beneath that. So this is the main page of that site. This is all information that I took from the cemetery master plan from 1996, so it could be outdated. We can update it as we go when we look further into this. But it's basically just different descriptions of what each cemetery. It might be nice to add pictures of different ones, so you guys can have like the Legion has a nice archway, or the Masons have I think a nice gate, so we could add pictures like that if we wanted. And then we have the contact information for our different departments, and then here's the cemetery master plan in case you guys ever lose it in an email or anything like that. And then we have our different forms that we can go through in a minute. So then the other section is the burial plot permit, and I can go through what I have on OpenGov later in a minute after the maps. Yeah, but then this is the information that I took from the clerk's office, we have burial brochures and cemetery information, so I just kind of compiled all that so it's online. So I didn't make any of the stuff up, it's all, I just took it from other resources. And then we just had more information on that. And then I had added the cemetery contacts, so each designated person for the private cemeteries are listed on here. And then cemetery maintenance. When Parks and Rec is ready, they can add more to that because they maintain our cemeteries. And I'm not sure what they want to add to it yet, so it's just there for them. And then here's our maps, or the webpage for the maps. This is just an area showing like this is where we're focused on, to putting new burials, because that's that new part of the Oddfellows section. And then here are the two maps that I had created, and then I had a little blurb about the editable mapping project down here with what I had mentioned to you guys with Carrie Martin and all of that. There are still 400 individuals not identified, like their place of burial have not been identified. So if anyone knows anybody, please let me know.
You found the grave, or you just don't know where they are?
I don't know where they are, and we have a lot of unknown graves, so I'm not sure. They could be less than the 400, but I just don't know who to tie them to, sadly. And then these are our maps. So this is the master map, or what I'm calling the master map. So you can zoom in to the different plots, and then on your right-hand side is the individual that you choose. So this is just the first one that pops up. I think it's just the first one right there at the Legion, or B1. But you can search for someone by using the search bar. So this is one that I would always test, or not. And then if you, it will pop up with all the people with that last name. And then you can click on an individual. It should zoom to that plot. You can click on multiples of them to find them. You just have to play around with it. I did that option because I thought it would be nice to highlight the multiple people. Let's say you had different family members in different sections. But if it's too confusing, while you guys use it, you can let me know and I can change it to just selecting one. But for this one, so this one's Christine. Here's all of her information of what I had from either Totem Tracers or just any of the maps. And then if you scroll down, you can click on their picture and it will pop up bigger, which is nice if you can't see it in that smaller side. And then if they had an obituary, I did scan in all the obituaries that I believe it was Lee Pileski that's been compiling them at the library. So I scanned them all in, and then if they were associated with someone, I attached them, so then you can get their obituary. So that's the master one. And then, oh sorry, this is, if you want the different layers, you can see the GPR results also on here. So these are, you could take off the plots, you can add the GPR results. I'll show you, this is this section that I have it as green as available, and then the GPR results are showing all these major disturbances. So I don't know. We might have to go test one out, maybe, I'm not sure. So that's that map. And then the editable one is a little different format. I have instructions on this side. One thing I forgot to mention also, on this mapping page, I have resources where I created video tutorials and handwritten instructions if you guys aren't familiar how to work the maps, so there are those instructions for you to use. And then the editable map, so you can create a plot. So let's say you knew someone was buried over here in the Pioneers. You would click the editable or the editing button, and you want to click occupied because that's a plot that's occupied. This button is just to say what shape you want to do. I prefer the rectangle because that's the plot. And then you can just draw one. And it'll add the shape, and then you can put in the information that you know.
So you're not actually putting something, somebody can't go in and just put a rectangle in there and just add stuff to it. I mean, that has to be.
No, they can.
But you would approve it though, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's not gonna go on the map and go
Oh, God.
No. Like it can't, Selena's the one that has to approve it, and make sure it's like legit, and,
That'd be all bad.
right.
So I would delete it if they like created something that was by accident, or you could probably tell if
Yeah,
it wasn't
okay.
like a correct shape or correct information. But that's why there's two different maps. So the master one, no one can edit. This one is for the public to use. And then you just fill out the information that you have, and then if you have any attachments, you can attach them, and then you hit save when you're done. Yeah, and that's how you add information. Or if you don't want to add a new plot, you can just click on a person and you can add to their information as well, or edit it. Or if you have the obituary, you can add it, kind of thing, or picture. So this is just more for the public, and it also has the GPR results as well in case people wanted to use that for reference. So that's that map. And then I didn't know if you guys wanted me to discuss the OpenGov part next. Do you want me to do that, or?
Do you guys have any questions about any of, I mean, that's a lot of stuff on there. Do you guys have any like just questions or observations in regards to the map or the GPR, like the gun-penetrating
I've
radar?
got a couple of things here that, because of the things that we've worked with at the Legion, is that the land integrity, you're saying that a lot of the irregularities and the depressions and things like this, you might think that something may have caved in, but you couldn't find anything. When we were clearing out the back acre of the Legion Cemetery, that we were trying to do that, the ground just undulates everywhere, and when you start pulling roots out and everything else like this, they may have done that at one point, because you can see there's a lot of trees in some areas and not in other areas. It may be just a result of that.
Yeah.
That's what I was sort of thinking when you were going through that, because we have the same thing on the Legion Cemetery. Also, too, those areas with depressions, unfortunately, we've had to exhume people before, and Alaska doesn't require you have a cement encasement to put your casket in.
Right.
So they put dirt and you drop your casket in, and that takes, very little time for those to, disintegrate.
Yeah.
So that's problematic. And the other thing too is, when you said Lee Pileski was doing it, is the scanner working at the library now? Because they had a grant written, I don't know if they ever got one back.
Oh, no, I had trucked them to our department and scanned them. And then
Oh,
gave it
just
back.
regular ones? Because I know they had a lot of that stuff on microfiche.
Oh, no, because this was binders that I had. That
Okay,
he had
okay.
taken individual by like ABC.
Okay, yeah. I think that's all I've got right now.
Just as kind of a silly question, maybe a morbid question, but with the potential of like not being able to use a lot of those sites, are we like in danger of filling up, or how's the?
No, I think the last count that I had, we still had, with the Oddfellows section, that new part, there's still about like 300 or so, and then there's little like cremain sites that we have, and then I believe you have the columbarium.
Yeah, we have columbarium that are going in. See, actually, it's actually that little like loop right there, and that. So what we end up putting like that'll become like a walkway, and then we'll have like multiple columbaria that will go on there. That's kind of like the plan that you guys will actually get to have some more like concrete input on. The Mason Cemetery to the right or east, like that's only like about half full, and I don't know if they're really even like using that at some point in time. So I would not be surprised if at some point in time we end up getting like that ends up becoming like another usable portion for us. So to answer your question, we do have, I would say, quite a bit more room as far as we only have like a handful of burials every summer so far. But we're also at the same time planning for the future and wanting to make best use of our space by using columbaria or like cremain sites, so that you're not using these super large plots. And so we're trying to look to the future as well. So that's one of the things that you guys will get to have input on, and like what you would like to see in certain areas, and how that's going to go. So, yeah.
What is columbarium?
Columbarium is one of those things. It's like an above ground like thing of marble, and it basically has compartments that you can get like a name. It's basically like a small little like plaque that has the person's name, kind of just basically like similar to what you'd see on like a headstone. many small ones. So then what they can do is, that's a compartment, they can put their cremains inside there
I see.
and lock that, kind of lock that up.
Large mailboxes.
Yeah, basically what it is, yeah. So, but they're really pretty. I mean, you see like really ornate memorial gardens made with those, and that looks really, really nice. And so they can basically put, you know, I mean, I think the ones that we have were 24 spaces, or at least maybe 24 on one side.
Yeah, it's 24 and 20, you got 48.
Yeah, 48. And
Total,
so,
yeah.
so it really, like, they're heavy as all get out, but they don't really, I mean, you're not taking up a lot of space, and so you're basically putting 50 people in like a, not much bigger than like a sheet of plywood footprint, basically.
pretty
And
much.
so, yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And it is, like, this is one of those things, if you do go read the history, it's been very interesting, where they have the Woodlawn Cemetery that's out of town there by Salmon Creek. You go down there and that's off to the right. The water table rose, I think probably some of it was due to the earthquake and whatever. And so, that's still one of our cemeteries, but that one is just volunteer kind of kept. As part of our master plan, we do have like the lot that sits next to it. And so we can have discussions around what you guys would like to see there, because there is no really parking at that cemetery. And anyway, but people were transported from that one into town. There's people we know that there was people basically buried in where the Citizens Ball Field is. And then it grew up, and then when they cleared it, they were pushing some headstones. And then up the hill, kind of up behind Phoenix, if you guys know where, like, it's that basically the entrance to Steve Lear's property. When you go up that side, if you go up in the trees up there was another like small cemetery that was up there one time. And so those are noted in there, and so, but it's just interesting to see how people were exhumed and then they were moved down to the lower 48. Read some of the history. Doug Capper has some interesting pieces on that as well. So it's very kind of complex, and so we're kind of in this trying to solve a lot of the puzzle and get to know what we can, at least, so that way moving forward and set up some things so that we don't continue on, because even in the last 10 years people have buried and they never put a headstone up and they're like, oh, we're gone. I mean, we don't know like who's there, type of situation. And so we want, that way we want to establish something that as we go forward we can keep really good records and not, you know, kind of solve the problems as we can. So okay, go on. Go.
Okay, and then we can go back to the permit discussion, if you guys would like. So we kind of have, I don't know if it's like a convoluted process so far of how to do like reservations and burial plot permits, which is why we wanted to like start this work session and start talking about this if we can make it better. So currently, the clerk has the burial plot permit, and this is, I think you can see it in your packets as well. It's called the cemetery use permit, which me and Courtney were like talking about today, like the naming of it. Do we stick with burial plot permit or cemetery use permit? You know, just kind of the consistency. But this is their page that they have. And I talked with the clerks too, that they want to maybe clean this up a little bit, because the first part can be answered by the person applying for it, but then the second part kind of gets a little wonky with, they want the funeral home information and the date of burial, which we wouldn't know that on our side. And then another issue that we kind of have to work out is when these people are buried in private cemeteries. I don't know where they're being buried, so maybe like we can come up with a workflow where people email me where they're at so I can add them to the map, or just something, I don't know, because otherwise they kind of go unassigned until someone can go out and like verify on the grounds where they are. But for the city section, I can do that on the map because we go out there and spray the lines and stuff like that for the burial plots. So that's the clerk's one. And then ours, we've been really getting into the OpenGov software where we do the business license. We've been trying to explore more with what that software can do. So I put our reservation one on there to see how it would go. I think there was a couple of public comments, but I haven't had anyone try it yet. So I think if I wanted to apply online, oh, do I have to sign in?
So are you trying to work with this so that you have most everything can be done online?
Yeah, because it's different departments. So that's the other thing with the like cemetery use permit one. She's got, or they have the clerk's one that they have to file. So the person has to file with the clerk, but then they have to go to the utilities counter to pay the $25 for the burial permit and then $100 for the deposit for the headstone. And then on the back end, somehow we have to like assign the spot, community development has to assign the spot. And then we also have Parks and Rec that should hopefully go out and like mark the grave site and get it ready for burial. So it's like different departments. There's finance with the, and it gets kind of crazy. So that OpenGov, I don't know if you guys have applied for any of those business licenses. They kind of have like the different departments and you can see the workflow so you can see which department approved which step. And it might be more easy to do. So this one, so this would be if I was like filling out the reservation one. And this is, it's also screenshot on in your packets. I think it starts on page 13. So I just have my contact information. And then you confirm.
Would that be more of an administrative thing within, internal to the city as opposed to something that planning would wind up doing? I'm not quite sure what our input would be. I would hate to change your
And I think,
your schedule
No,
and
I-
impose something on that.
yeah, I think what we want, like, for you guys, we want to just get input on, like, a little bit of process, and because, like, and for instance, like, the headstone fee, one of our biggest problems is that people, they're supposed to give us a deposit,
Right.
and they do, but they never, like, is it too low? Because it's $100.
It's way too low.
And then people don't ever deal anything with it, and so now, right now, I think Parks and Rec ordered, I don't know how many,
Only 40 or so. I
40,
think.
like, but we probably need another 160 at least.
Probably
To put like temporary markers down, like this is spot number and assign a number to it, so that way if anyone ever comes to it, we can at least say that's where it is, because we've had this happen so often over the years, where if someone doesn't place their headstone, and then it kind of like no one really tracked it. And so we need to, so part of the reason why we're going through this process with you guys, and I think too, you guys can even make recommendations on certain things, but understanding like the fee process, and we're gonna be looking at, as we clean this up, because it's so far out of date, looking at the way we space things out for burials, like we don't have we need to make sure that all cemeteries have the same code, which they don't right now currently, like burial depths and all that kind of stuff too. And so it's kind of one of those interesting. So part of the reason that we wanted to walk you through the process is just so you kind of encounter some of the fees, and.
As I look through the cemetery management plan that they had, originally the $100 was, because it's that old, it says they said said you need to pay $100 to get that money back when you put a headstone down, but that back then was how much a headstone cost. Now a headstone, for the least expensive that I've been able to encounter up in Anchorage, is about $1,100, and that's that granite, run-of-the-mill, the plain stuff that's there. So, because that's what's happened, we have the same thing with the Legion. People just will, oh yeah, we'll go ahead, get the $100, and then they put somebody in the ground and we never see a headstone, and then we wind up paying for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then even just talking about, like, do we want to make, some of the older parts of the cemetery, they've got stand-up headstones, or do we want to make it so that everything going forward is more flush mount? It's way easier for maintenance. Yeah, so there's just a lot of like pieces, since this is kind of a planning and zoning document, there's just a lot of pieces that we want you to understand the process, so that way you guys can give us some guidance around what you think on those items. So, And again, today's just like an introduction, so you can understand some of the pieces, and then we can, just to, you guys can become familiar with the different parts. And then you can ask us to say, hey, could you guys get us some information, and we can address certain issues. Like some issues are going to be pretty easy to address, and others might be a little more, require some more conversation, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically just kind of, we're just reviewing all the different spots. So we have like, one was that burial, or the cemetery use permit is one, workflow, and then the reservations, and just like figuring out the different departments, and how we work together with that. And then the fees, and then just having those standards in the cemetery, like he was saying with like the burial depth, and like, because I think ours, or somewhere I had read that it's like 5 by 10, and that we're like supposed to be head to head at some point, and we don't follow. I don't think we're following that. There's some people that are like head to toe, and some might be head to head in some areas of the cemetery. So it's just things like that we want to clean up and make it user friendly too, because a lot of people come in with questions, and it would be nice to have like a standard marker size, or materials and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then too, if you notice, like we have a lot of like places in the cemetery where people left it, they didn't actually extract the material and take it with them, and they just put it back on top, and so then you have these like mounds.
Yeah.
And that's like really hard to maintain, and so we now will have to at some point in time hire someone to come and scrape those, and then plant grass over the top. And so just helping us establish, like, we need to take this thing and put rules and regulations around it. And
do you have a priority of what you want? Because we've gone to a lot of different areas. Do you have a priority for us to make recommendations? Because there's a lot to digest, and I don't know what's the most important thing that you want to get off your plate, or
And I think in a practical sense, we did put the current code, which is in Title 7, I believe. And I think which Title 7, I think, is it Title 7?
Yeah.
And that deals with more like public plans, but we need to bring that over to Title 15, or at least have Title 15 point to it. And then I just think we need to kind of update that code on what we're going to allow in our cemeteries going forward. So at least I think if we can establish some fees, like update our fees, and clarify our process, and then make sure our code matches. So like, yes, we are bearing head to toe, because I think it's head to head doesn't make any sense, especially like in my mind anyway. If you're like laying out a cemetery, it seems like if you're walking down that one road, you'd want your headstones
over there
facing in, and everything, like, so that would be head to toe on both sides type of situation, or depending on how you want your layout or something like that, we may get some input, but just to create some consistency moving forward. I think that's probably going to be the biggest one. And then I do think that as we create those new pieces, we can put that code in there, and it's just going to take time over probably a couple of years to like go back and look at the history and bring the history up to date. That might be like a 2024 type of situation, but I think in a very practical sense, just getting the code so it applies to all cemeteries, and then getting things like burial depth and plot size and
consistency seems to be a pretty good place to start. I mean, like you said, the orientation, also I think it's pretty important to do have the headstones all the same going forth, and especially flush, so we can cut down on our maintenance costs. Also, that headstone fee needs to come up, because like Chair Sullivan said, it needs to be basically so that it's what the city would have to pay to put one there, so we don't have the taxpayers burdened by people that skip out of town and don't put a headstone on, because everybody deserves a headstone out there. So it just needs to be so that if they leave, we can just take that money and buy a headstone, and it's not a problem for taxpayers.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. You may get a little balking because that's 10 times the amount of what it is, but it is an expensive proposition. You get the flush ones that are particular, I mean, if you get the brass, or the bronze ones, those are $3,300. And, but if you get the basic one, that was the 1,100, yeah.
I mean, some research to find out what the bare minimum is, so that, obviously, so we're not making people buy something that's more costly than they really need to, but there still needs to be a headstone. And we shouldn't have to pay for everybody else's headstone because somebody doesn't want to buy their relative a headstone.
Well, does that occur, like that a headstone does eventually go to all and the taxpayers pay on it, or some just remain no headstone?
Well, in Legion, we wind up putting it on there. We know what it is and somebody's, not paying.
We're paying for it. Like
So there is always going a headstone in.
Well, we're gonna have to, because
Yeah.
we're, right now, as we made discoveries for all these places that we know there's someone here,
Right.
we don't know who they are.
Yeah, mark.
We're having headstones made, then it's more like a temporary marker that could be there in perpetuity,
Yeah.
that basically says, someone's here, this is number, and we're gonna assign a number system to them, just to acknowledge, so that we don't
Yeah.
have to, like, in 10 years, someone doesn't go, I wonder if there's someone there.
Right.
And then two, if, let's say someone does come and be like, I know who's here, then we can take that number, and we have a point that we can point it back to and be like, okay, we can pull this, and then we can at least figure out a way to get something more permanent there. But at this point, like Parks and, when I say Parks and Rec, we're having to put like temporary markers in, we're gonna have to do these like long-term temporary ones,
Right.
as well.
Yeah.
We put temporary ones in so that once people are like buried and they haven't got their stone yet, we put that there.
Yeah.
And in the past, they used like metal stakes, and the metal stakes got pulled out, and then no one ever knew better of what, that there was anyone there. So anyway, the taxpayers have been paying for that not being followed up with.
Yeah, everything needs to have a headstone, whether it's
Yeah.
unknown,
Right.
203 hashtag whatever,
Right.
or John Doe.
Yep.
I think also, if I read in there, it was a year that they have to.
To get their deposit back.
Yeah, I'm not sure, maybe we need to look into it, how long it takes to get a headstone, but a year seems kind of a long time for something to get pulled out, like the temporary to get lost, or I don't know, maybe we can find out if we can shorten that time a little bit, or maybe, 'cause the stake's not gonna do it, because, that's easy to get pushed over, blown over, something.
Yeah.
Are you still doing stakes, or are they doing a different temporary that's better? Okay.
We're basically like have these round ones, and we put like, yeah, I mean, like not round ones, but they're square ones, but they are made out of some kind of like rock material, and we put them on the
Okay.
ground, and then we do mark them up so we know what that is.
Okay.
But we're gonna have ones that are engraved, and so, but they're gonna be flush mount so that we can mow over them, because
Yeah,
some of them may be there for perpetuity. Yeah.
okay.
Here's another thought, because it is so expensive. I was just like brainstorming with Courtney today. Maybe there's some cemeteries that have like an ash garden where you can scatter it, and they don't put headstones. Like it's just kind of like an area where they can scatter remains. It's just like, maybe if someone didn't have money for a headstone and we're just cremating it, and they could have like, we could make it into nice like flower beds, or I don't know if there's a section in the cemetery that we could use that for. It's just like one of, I don't know, been reading a lot on cemeteries, so that's one of the options maybe.
But they could potentially just scatter the ashes
Just right there.
somewhere else too.
Yeah.
But they might be encouraged if you have a space that's just
That's
for
true,
that,
and
you know.
maybe relatives are in the cemetery and they want to place
'cause
the
then you
ashes
know it's
near
that
their
spot.
relatives.
Yeah.
It's something to be looked into.
Yeah, and you could have, you know how the cemetery has that plaque area that lists everyone that's buried in the cemetery. You could kind of have a similar type of plaque for an ash garden that would then still at least list the names of whose ashes have been,
Something to be a little less expensive
yeah,
than
and
something
just a
like that.
name.
A little tiny engraved plaque.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually like when we went to a recent service at the Legion, and they just basically like dug a hole in the ground right there, and they're gonna set their plaque down on top of that. And that's, but it takes up a very small space, and so I think that's even just a way of like, something very simple, but
You can get those niche markers too, if you do the ones, for the for the cremains, and they're like about this, like this by this, that goes over that, so there's some real tiny ones for cremains as opposed to the big standard flat one, which are more expensive. But yeah, you can put, you'd say multiple people in one location, so to speak, because with the cremains, you just put the different, urns in the ground. You just park their headstone on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to make people buy expensive headstones.
Right.
But the marker needs to be placed,
Mhm.
and the city shouldn't have to buy the marker. So I think looking into what the most cost-effective marker
Just
is.
different options.
Yeah.
That would be good to list out, because it wouldn't be so, overwhelming for somebody if we're saying, well, you're gonna give us $1,000, plus they've already are burying somebody. If there's something less expensive, then you know what you can go for. And if they don't do it, then you use that money to get the smaller one.
I think there also were some citizens' comments that had some pretty good recommendations in there that we might want to think about.
As we look at that, I had a couple things just coming to my mind. Well, Selena, this is really amazing, and helpful, and great presentation. And maybe you're still in it, but easy to follow with a lot of information, so thank you. Funeral home, seems like there's a role there that's important. Is the same funeral home typically used? Are there several? Is they're the ones digging and kind of, getting it back looking flat and all that? I don't know about this, so I just...
So the way it works is that we either get contacted by an individual or we get contacted by a funeral home. And so the funeral home is obviously doing business on behalf of the family.
Right.
And so a lot of times what they do is they will kind of take care of everything in regards to like the plot. They'll do all that stuff like that. I mean, ultimately they're charging, that cost is being done to the family, but they actually don't dig.
Okay.
Because we don't have any funeral homes here.
Okay.
So it's actually only locals that that dig here. We did have someone that used to do it by hand, but I found out too they weren't digging deep enough. And then, so I know that one person that's done it, done a couple is Isaac Elhart, where he has like a really small track hoe and he can roll it out on board so it doesn't damage the grass, and he digs it out clean. And so, I mean, there's a few people in that town that have that type of equipment that I'm sure that could be used for that.
Yeah.
And then they have to pay a separate fee that we don't have anything to do with in regards to paying for that service. And so we just basically give them like, here are your options, or here's some people's names that you can call for that service. And then we go out and market in advance, and then we try and meet with that person in advance to say, here's where you need to, here's the space, and we go mark it out. That's something that Parks and Rec will eventually do. They haven't had kind of enough help, but also too, we were more familiar with it, and we knew where the markers were so that we can measure off from different points and basically make sure that it's the right spot. So
there's probably several different funeral homes that have been used over the years. And like after the ceremony, right, when it's time to, is that done by the funeral home or by someone like Isaac?
That's someone
Whoever
dug it up,
finished
and they're responsible for removing the material
Right.
and then placing the grass back and putting it. But even just like we tell people that, and then it doesn't get done. And so even recently, like there's a couple of new ones, and you're like, so it's just frustrating because the inconsistency of some people either do it right or some other people just leave it all mounded up, and now we have to go pay to unmound those and plant grass back over the top. So.
And thank you. Then the other thing that came to mind, and this is something I'm sure you do a lot, it's basic, but like, examples of other towns that have cemetery plans that are more recently updated than '96. You're getting information from them, sharing information, like that could probably be a good thing to do that you're already doing, but.
Yeah, it's a learning process. We've talked to like.
Because that applies,
Yeah.
right? Like Homer or whatever can apply right
Yep.
to Stewart. Of course, every cemetery is different, but I'm sure they've been through some of these issues and.
Yep, and we've talked to some of them. We know that Anchorage and I think Fairbanks are the only municipalities that require you to have the casket liners, those concrete things.
Right.
You drop the casket.
Vaults.
Yeah, the vault. Yeah. No one really else in the state of Alaska does. And then we've learned something about like depths and that type of thing, so we have kind of talked to them about some of those different pieces, so.
And then, like even maintenance of it, we have kind of a hard time keeping up with it, with like mowing, or don't we have like a contractor that comes out to mow?
Yeah, the Parks and Rec, because they didn't have help last year, they paid a contractor to come out and mow. And so, but yeah, ultimately, hopefully we get back to a place where we have the kind of more permanent staff that can just mow and maintain it on a regular basis. So last year it did get overgrown quite a bit.
Or even, I've seen other cemeteries, they've had like volunteer days where like, before Memorial Day or something, people from the public will go out and like collect any trash or anything, or before it snows, get the dead flowers out, just kind of clean it up. Even like implementing those kind of things could be helpful.
Yeah, it's just tough. I think like I'm feeling like we're having, when you ask for volunteers nowadays, it's harder and harder to get volunteers. Like this year, and I would say, speaking personally, is we had the Super Saturday, and there was no, like, compared to like past years that I've seen, there was not that many people out. There's still, I remember just like all the way down Seward Highway, there'd be people like walking, you wouldn't see any trash anywhere, and it just like, I think it's tough to get volunteers, tougher to get volunteers than it once was. And we're always usually out everywhere on Super Saturday trying to clean up, and so I think, the maintenance thing is a tough one, and then it looks like we got a lot of complaints. We had a number of complaints last year about the grass being too tall and stuff like that, so.
Or just even like the stones that we would be getting, we'd make sure that they don't sink into the ground and the moss covers over them. Like there's some markers, like it's a whole cement slab and it's been covered over with moss.
Yes, we went and dug stuff out last year. This has been a discovery, like hands-on discovery experience by us in different ways of like getting out there and just like learning it and understanding it. So we feel like we have got a really good kind of pulse on it, so.
There's a lot to it.
So also, are you?
Yeah.
Okay. The citizens' comments that I was looking at that.
Yep, right here.
They were talking about putting in a section that talks about planting things. We're gonna mow over everything flat. So would it be a good idea to mention that this isn't a place to plant plants as, say, a memento or keepsake, or some sort of after tree? It's gonna get mowed over.
Yeah, it's probably not a good, I think that,
I think there was something mentioned there.
and where was that?
I know at the.
Oh yeah, should trees, there should be a plan for landscaping, which I agree with. The planting, that prohibits the planting of live plants, and I think that's something that we need to make clear.
Okay.
Like in those comments right there, I feel like taking things like that, we can easily translate that into our code and into the brochures and into like the cemetery standards. And so I think I'm just making it very clear and having, I feel like it's somewhat already clear, but at the same time too, like when you're dealing with those situations, I've dealt with that and been in that situation too, when you're going through the process of like making these plans and all that stuff. And so I think a lot of times you just miss it if you're not thinking about it or whatever. But I do think, there's lots of things that we can do to clean this up and have it not be a problem.
Yeah.
And so I think actually that might be one of those, an idea of what we could do is kind of come back to you with, we need to talk about like, looking at like making sure the code is updating the code and then making sure it's placed for both private and public cemeteries. And maybe that could be our first step, is just bringing the practical pieces back to you and getting input from you on everything from like the fees to regulations of like planting live plants, or all those types of pieces. We could bring back kind of a series of chunks back to you to get input on that we could implement.
I think, just policing it up altogether, because, there's a lot of times where they have flowers out there, and I know that, you don't want them to stay there forever. And, I know the Legion has a 48-hour limit, which never gets, necessarily, flowers don't die that quick all the time. But the other thing too is, A lot of times there's glass vases, they stick out there. And then when people are walking around and mowing, or if somebody's out there visiting a grave, and you've got this thing that's been blown over and it's cracked open, you can potentially hurt somebody. Or, you know,
Yeah, when they get blown around, stuff gets blown around and it starts to
Yeah.
look poor.
It'd be nice to, like you were saying, tighten up and clarify with a lot of it, and then come back and look at it. The decorations too, like, you know, Chair was saying that, you know, we want this place to look nice and also be able to maintain it. So we want to make sure that items that are placed out there are removed, or maybe certain items are just not, you know, I won't say prohibited, but kind of
I think it's okay to
try to
prohibit.
stay away from something that's going to break.
Yeah, I think it's okay to
Glass.
prohibit items, just for the safety and well-being of of people that might be walking around, or,
Yeah.
you know, maintenance workers,
Yeah.
so.
it'd be nice if you had a cemetery curator for all the cemeteries, somebody who could sort of target that. That would be sort of, most places I've known have had that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's, unfortunately, it's everything's pretty much almost a volunteer kind of scenario around here.
Right.
You know, the Pioneers, the Masons, Legion, you know, in the city, it's just, you guys have got so much stuff that's going on there, you don't have anybody particularly dedicated to it yet. I mean, went from community development, then went to Parks and Rec for a while, so it's bounced back and forth a few times, and things get sort of lost in translation sometimes.
Yeah.
There's some comments on the permit application, some changes that we might be a good idea to look at, maybe considering making the application a little gender neutral, or just some wordsmith in there that, you know, we could look at as well, that I thought probably would just make it nicer, a little cleaner.
Okay.
What I would suggest, one place to call it that I've dealt with, because having to buy stuff, Alaska Memorial and Monuments up in Anchorage. They seem to have the best prices that I've dealt with. I mean, you can get different guys, or different organizations, but at least it's up there. And they had a fairly quick turnaround. I think I got mine like within 6 weeks.
Okay. All right, we'll give them a call and start kind of collecting some information around that kind of stuff.
Let's see.
I don't know if it was anything considered. A lot of cemeteries have, like, you know, benches and areas where people can sit. Sort of I don't know, that might create some other challenges, you know, but that might be, I don't know if that's something that you'd want to do, or just overall prohibit altogether. I don't know. It's
I do think that, like, in some ways that they would fit, and so, like, as we kind of look to some of the future pieces, like where it does have that, I think it used to be, I think it was actually designed to be like a turnaround cul-de-sac, but right there. But really, we're gonna make that a walkway, and then we're gonna space like Columbaria probably at, like, you know, the 12, 3, 6, and 9 positions possibly, or just even, or put them around there in such a way. I mean, you could have like a garden piece in the middle, and if you have that gravel or like some benches in there, it makes it very nice for people to sit.
that'd be nice.
And it's, you know, I think as long as that stays gravel in there, it's pretty, like, just for walking path.
Yeah.
It's gonna be kind of low maintenance. You're not having to like mow around it, which I think is the biggest hurdle with.
And it's easily visible from the street if, you know, the police are driving by, that people aren't partying there, which is
Right.
always, we've had to chase people off,
Yeah.
you know, different places.
Yeah.
So,
Benches around those new calamaris would be nice, because easily maintained and
Yeah.
people can sit in.
Yeah. Okay.
and that's really an effective use of space,
Mm-hmm.
because people these days, it's much, not to sound callous, but it's cheaper to cremate somebody than to bury them regularly.
Oh, by far, yeah.
So did you want us to look at the fees first, or do you want us to look at the
Well,
land stuff?
well, what we could do is we could,
I wanna just-
I mean, I think just in general, we're gonna do some research on that headstone fee for sure. That's an easy one.
Okay.
Are there any other fees that we, just in general, we wanted to?
I mean, this one, I'm just gonna say it out loud, because it's, I've seen in the past that, I don't know if it was like 2008, but the city had tried to, like Parks and Rec had charged a maintenance fee.
That's pretty cool.
That would maybe help with like cost for, you know, keeping, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying we should have one, and they have tried in the past to put one in.
You have to have a reservation fee too? Isn't
Yeah,
that
we have a
$500?
reservation fee, that one,
Yeah.
$500.
Yeah.
There's like, I don't know where the fees would go in.
Yeah, we, like the burial, how much, the burial fee's like $100?
Burial fee, yeah, the
25?
permit's 25.
Permit's 25,
Yep.
and then is there another fee on that? Or no?
And then the deposit for the headstone is $100.
That's okay.
And then the reservation is 500.
Yeah, if you want to reserve in advance, yeah. Yeah. And there's rules around that, like we don't, like, funeral homes cannot reserve spots, only individuals can or families can.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to just make sure that the fees are, I don't want to say high enough, but they're able to cover the city and administration's time that goes into processing all of it. I think they might be, but I'm not positive. Just, I'm not saying they need to be raised, but I just want to make sure that, you know, everybody else isn't having to pick up,
Yeah.
you know, a slack.
Yeah.
Well, if it's online, it might make it easier too.
Yeah, that's
If
true.
it's- I guess,
sure.
If
yeah.
it went to more online, then fees would come down. I don't know, but just make sure that it covers the administration's time.
With 4 different departments having to touch it, I don't know, could the permit fee go up a little bit? Like 25 seems pretty low for all those people trying to work it, so. Maybe
Yeah.
a spot.
And we can always call around and get some ideas on like what other fees are charging and that, just to kind of at least baseline ours and kind of say, here's what that is. So we can bring back to you kind of a list of what other places are doing.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
And did you want us to take a look at any of the definitions, if there was anything to highlight? You know, just to review. The other thing too is the definitions. Will these definitions always stay here, or are we gonna, again, like consolidate all the definitions into one big area?
So, and I think we need, that's one of the pieces. So right now, chapter 7.20, cemeteries and burials, it technically only covers public property. So that means this code right here technically only covers the city-owned parcels. So we need to basically either reference this in Title 15 that says all cemeteries, public and private, will comply with these codes
That's a good idea.
as listed in chapter 7.2, or we can completely like reintroduce, so just to make it more clear, we can reintroduce all, we can basically create a kind of a copy of that into Title 15 and create like a cemeteries and burials in Title 15 as well. So we can update the code, and then you guys can figure out how you want to either point to it from 15 or how you want to add it to 15. So that would be I think either would be,
Wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel. I think it'd be easier to
Yeah.
point as opposed to move everything over.
yeah.
Yeah. Make it easy.
Yeah.
And Vice Chair Brier mentioned so do all 4 departments have to deal with these documents? Is that something that can be just kind of worked out a little more efficiently, or
I mean, if we put it online, then I don't think finance has to deal with it, because it would just go through, or they would be on the back end. I think they would have just deal with the account stuff, but
Yeah.
online makes it easier to pay, so the front person doesn't have to deal with it as much. The other stuff I'm not sure, because I know the permit itself is under the like city clerks, and we just took reservations because I have the mapping part. So I'm not sure we could go to 1 or 2.
okay?
Because usually, and I think the thought behind Parks and Rec is because they have like, or hopefully they would have the manpower to go out there, person power to go out there, mark up the graves and clean up and stuff.
Yeah, that's what used to take place, is they would go out there and they would mark them, and they'd be like, oh, mark X22, and they'd be like, okay, I'll go out there and I know where it is, and they'd mark it out for them. Part of it too is no one knows, well, we're the only ones who know where everything is. And so,
That's helpful.
That's
That's
right, and just because we're in the process of developing the system, and we have that record, and we know like how far to measure, and we can double and triple check, and we went out and marked stuff, and so part of it is that we're learning and we're trying to get it really right, and then we can show others how to do it, hopefully in the future, so that someone in Parks and Rec is there long enough to be able to take it over, and we have a person, we had a couple people that owned that for a long time. Who was it? Mark Staubel?
Yeah.
Mark Staubel was one of them. Lee Pileski, I think, did a lot of time there. obviously, and so there's been some people there that spent a lot of time that they knew the system. So,
Okay.
but right now we don't trust anyone else to go and mow.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, and those plots in that new section were marked by the surveyor, so there are technically pins out there, but many of them are now buried and difficult to find.
Yeah, and so we know how to find some of the pins, which that means we can use those pins to find the other pins, is kind of what happens.
Yeah, you guys just need to keep that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty complicated.
So,
Okay.
but here's my thought, is that we'll bring back to you, I think some, maybe like proposed changes in regards to process fees, applications, rules, and then ways to, and it may take a couple of swipes to get it, but at least getting our current operations and what we require cleaned up, so that way when we go moving forward, we kind of have this point in time we can say like, hey, we know that we require this, no, you can't put that on your headstone, no, it's got to lay flat. You know, some of these things, at least we can get that put in place, just because we need that sooner than later, because right now sometimes you don't have solid answers for people because there's nothing very clear.
Yeah, that sounds good.
They were good.
At least somewhere to start.
It's a project.
But,
Yeah, but it's a really important one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like
Definitely.
dealing with like land use and space in the future, and having good records and continuing to, and I think what Selena built there, being able to like search on
That's
people's,
huge. That is
It's
huge.
amazing.
and being able to go and like, you can see the headstone, you can find their obituary if it's there, and then people to be able to add information in the future that's, when I used to work at the chamber, we got questions all the time, like, where is this person? And I'd be like, I don't know. I would call Sue. And Sue, and she was great. She always come down and help people and try and walk them through. But it's just nice that we have a tool that we can point people to where they can find, and it helps in the reservation system. It helps them in so many different ways, just to have real good records going forward. So.
And it's not on paper, you have it sort of, you can transfer some of that data to other areas that you need to have things, reported.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it nice.
Have you gone public, like putting in info? This is real new, but.
Yeah, not yet. I just don't know if people are
There
like,
will be a lot though, like.
I hope so. I just don't know if they're hesitant on using it. But I can delete the stuff on the back end, so if they want to, if they mess up a little bit, it's not a big deal.
Or like getting word out on that, hey, we have this new,
I think we put it on Facebook.
Okay.
And then it was at the city council presentation, and it was in the paper. So I feel like it's been out there, but I'm not sure if there's other places we could.
I think this is great that you guys did this, it's like a big undertaking, a lot of work, but you take the long view on things, which I think we do so much in this department on learning. So you start the work and it'll build, and then you'll have a much more organized system. And I don't know, we talk a lot about housing, right, and that's a big thing. This has nothing to do with housing, but it's important. So, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I have one question. When it's edited, when somebody edits the map, do you have to approve it before it goes live, or do you see it live and then go back and delete it if it's not right?
Yes, the latter part. So I don't have to approve them to edit it. Public's free to edit it, submit it, and then I'll go back in later, review all the changes. Because there's like a log of people who will say who changed it.
But it doesn't change the master one, right?
No.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
it is.
So it's kind of like this
Yeah.
other sandbox place where they can put stuff in, and then she could eventually transfer that over to the master one if it's correct and right. But it is a place where hopefully we'll get
I
some
see.
people on there
So-
that we know are interested in it.
So if it's approved, it will go on to the master one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's sort of time intensive too.
Yep.
Because if people, get that, and then they start going in there, and all the people in Seward that have relatives and otherwise, and they start cranking, information in, you're gonna have to go through all of those before you put it toward the master, as the data in there.
And we can get an intern maybe.
Yeah, at some point in time, we're gonna because Selena is pretty much like full-time GIS now, and so at some point in time, we do need to get another admin to kind of be taking up some of those tasks, because she's busy building the systems. So, yeah.
Your empire building, Jason.
No, don't want that.
Kidding.
Okay, so I feel like we have a good thing is we'll just focus on the code, on how to place that, and kind of the regulations. And as I'm looking through these topics of like, we have stuff on like permits, burials, records, rules and regulations about types and size, decorations, fees, interment locations, space, landscaping, maintenance, care, reservations, and so standards for grave markers, grave preparation. So we can bring kind of a list of proposed changes to this and just basically kind of update this document, then we can point to it from 15 and go through.
And we'll have to have a public hearing on it because it's going to be a code change of some
Yep.
sort with those
Yep.
things, and then bring it to the council.
Yeah, so we'll probably have, I would imagine we'll probably have a work session or two on that, and then we can bring that forward
Okay.
as part of a, and the thing that's great is that when we do this is actually updating the cemetery master plan. It's that's updating a portion of it, so it is kind of, updating part of the comp plan.
Yeah, so I figured dovetailing with that.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
it's a, the comp plan points to the cemetery's master plan. It mentions it, and so this is part of the work. Yeah.
That's great.
Sounds good.
Okay, anybody have anything else? Selena, you done?
I'm done.
You're done, you cooked. Okay. All right, well, we'll call this work session adjourned at 8:30. There we go.
Thank you.